All right, we are live on Facebook and YouTube. Got my boy Rufus Chambers here. We're going to be talking about his book today. And if you were looking at the flyer, you'll see that we're going to be talking about manhood today. So you have tuned in to Can We Have a Conversation? I'm your host today, Stuart Perelliot, and we're going to be talking about some things that I think will be very beneficial for men. Even if you're thinking, I didn't have a father, or, I've been struggling in this manhood and I don't really know why. I think we can discuss some things today that would give you some insight on why you feel the way you feel, that void that you have, that you might not have had a father in your life, or you might have been dealing with some rejection, or even having relationship problems. This is a wonderful book that Rufus has put together. I read it a few years ago, and then I started really studying on fatherhood and manhood, and he is completely on point. So I want to tell you a little bit about Rufus Chambers. He is a father, he's an author, he's a pastor, he's an engineer, works in the construction field for over 20 years. He's done many ministry connections with different various churches in the Bay Area. Now he resides in Los Angeles. We've been friends, brothers for over 14 years, and I just want to welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, Rufus.
Thank you, Stuart. It is a pleasure to be here on Can We Have a Conversation? And let me congratulate you on all of your success. I've been watching and cheering you on for a number of years. So it's so exciting to see your platform grow, not only locally in the Bay Area, but I understand you're now across borders and international ministry, man. So thanks for having me on this afternoon.
Absolutely, absolutely. I haven't met your father, but I've seen pictures of your father, and I've heard you and I've had conversations about you growing up, and
Mhm.
the pictures that I see. I mean, you and your dad is starting. The older you get, the more you look
Yeah,
like him,
that's so
and
true.
I'm sure just your mom has to be proud of you and your success and the things that you're doing. And so I just want to get into this book. First
Let's
of all, I
do it.
want to just how did you get into writing about manhood, and how did you come up with the title?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's funny, I was actually approached by a very close friend of mine who is an author, and he wanted us to co-author a book specifically on manhood. And I've always been very attracted to men's ministry and have served in men's ministry as well. And so initially this journey started with he and I tag team writing. We sat down and kind of created an outline together and decided which chapters each of us were going to tackle. And, about halfway through the journey, he said, "Hey, man, I just can't really finish the project." And I asked permission, like, "Hey, man, you mind if I kind of, take it forward?" And I believe we had a different name for the book back then, but you know, as I continued to write, what was really on my heart at the time, as I wanted to create something that was number one, practical. My goal in authoring the book was that any person, regardless of their age, would be able to read the book and understand the book. So that was a goal from the onset. Is that a teenager, a preteen, if he sat down to read the book, he could truly understand it. And then, secondly, I wanted it to be practical so that it was just an easy read. I didn't want to have something that was too challenging or too cumbersome. And even a lot of the stories that I shared in the book, it was to again try and make reading light. So and at the time I authored the book in 2000, or it was published in 2013. What I knew at that time in my life is that this whole manhood thing, it's a journey. It's not a destination. It's not a Rubik's Cube that you just solve and you have it all figured out. So that's why I was talking, and the title was about a road, and even the artwork on the cover, it speaks to a compass and this journey that we all have to navigate. So all of those images were very specific because, as you and I know, Stuart, you encounter men that are young men in their teenage years, and then you can even meet some older men that are, drawing Social Security. They all are trying to reconcile their life, their emotions, their thoughts, their feelings, their desires, which means, hey, on this journey of manhood, we need help. We need strategic help. We need tactical help. We need tangible help. So that's really the heart of writing this book.
No, it's a great book, and I'm not just saying it because I know you and you're my friend. I, have really researched and done the work myself, and the things that I have read in your book coincides with a lot of the
Mm,
stuff that I have already
wow.
been in research, and so I just want to commend you. For those that's just joining us, we have Rufus Chambers III. We're talking about his book I Stand, A Road to Manhood. And we're going to dive into some of the things that he talked about. But I just wanted to, kind of figure out how he came to writing this book and coming up with the title. In your book, you note that you wanted to uh, dedicate the book to your father.
Hmm.
And you went on to talk about that your father's legacies continues in you as far as you raising, and I know you have two beautiful daughters, raising your daughters and also impacting uh, other men in your ministry. And so you said you will forever cherish your love, your guidance, and the discipline, support, and teaching that your father has given you. A lot of, and I'm not really knocking uh, fathers. We've talked about a lot of negative fathers, but today's
Hmm.
show is about a positive father and how this
Hmm.
positive father has impacted your life into the success that you have as a husband, as a father, as a pastor, and actually as a man of God. And so
Hmm.
he seems to have done a really good job raising you and your daughter and your sister. One of the things that I want to talk about is you said the time we were together on earth has left a mark on my life that would never be erased. Uh, Kind of talk about that. When you say he left a mark on your life that never could be erased, what were you talking about?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, Stuart, the truth of the matter, just to the listeners that are listening, some of the men, regardless of how well you do your job as being a father, you're going to leave a mark on your child, be it you're present or be it you're absent, be it your consistency or be it your inconsistency. Those touches or lack of touches, they're going to leave a handprint, on your child. And, for me, I praise God that my father, his handprint was upon me, for 17 years. And in those 17 years, I can say that he was very intentional in influencing my life. And it's a trip how, when you have people in your life today, you can call them up, you kind of take some things for granted. And when he passed away in 1994, part of my maturation as a man was always trying to recount and recollect the time that I did have with him. That's why the old cliche talks about absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Mhm.
And there's so much truth in that statement for me. So, when I talk about that lasting impression, I really, and in the book, I talk about it, where that mental image of me watching my father's life, almost like a movie when I was a kid, those images were seared into my conscious. how he got up every day and went to work, how he brought his check home, how he put a suit on to go to work, how he made sacrifices for us as his children, how he made sacrifices for his wife, how he did little things, for himself, that he enjoyed, be it sports or, be it a glass of wine, be it music. I mean, so I just remember watching him, as a model before me. And that model, even it stays with me today, because even though he isn't here in the earth realm, I'm still, sometimes I still sit down and think, is my behavior or my actions, would they make him proud? You know what
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
saying? Because
Mhm.
again, he was, that's one thing, when he was here, he wasn't shy about communicating the standard. You know
Mhm.
what I
Mhm.
mean? To
Mhm.
me,
Mhm.
as a boy, it's like, hey, this is what you need to do. This is what your grades need to be. These are the chores you need to do. And so again, I grew up as you did, Stuart, where fathers and men, they were not as concerned about our feelings. They were more
Mhm.
concerned about who we were becoming.
Mhm.
And my father's hand was upon me, literally.
Mhm.
Sometimes
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it was literally upon me, with belts and hands and all kind of other stuff, but again, with that, again, those images, they're still in my psyche, they're still in my subconscious. And even as I wrote the book, it reinforced how lasting our childhoods are. You know what
Mhm.
I mean?
Mhm.
Where you can fast forward 20 to 30 years, but you can still talk to people about their childhoods, and it is if they're still living through
Mhm.
the good or the bad,
Mhm.
of their childhood. So yeah, that's what that lasting impression, was about. And sometimes I talk to some of my friends about it, and we we talk about, well, if he hadn't have passed away, would I have, cleaved to those 17 and a half years as tightly as I did, if
Mhm.
we would have had, again, now, I'm about to be 45 years old, but, just the timing of it, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? So,
Mhm.
but I mean, that's neither here nor there, but, that's just a little bit, man, about that lasting impression.
You talked about sacrifices, and I remember reading in the book you talked about that your dad was like over a chain of grocery stores, and that he made sure that your sister had a car to go to school, and your mom had a car to go to work, but he rode his bicycle to work. So I mean, he made a sacrifice to make sure that that everybody was taken care of, and he didn't mind riding. And you saying he went to work every day in a suit, so I take it he was wearing a suit on the bike, or you know.
Hey, man, and that's the thing. I don't know if my sister will remember the story the same way, but I specifically remember, watching him be on a bike, in a three-piece tweed suit.
Hmm.
And at the time, I think my sister was getting her license, and my father had bought his company car from the company. You know how
Hmm.
when a company car would kind of reach the end of its usefulness,
Hmm.
you know, and he bought it, for my
Right.
sister, because at the time my sister was at home going. We were living in Richmond. My sister was going to school at Holy Names, as you know, up in
Hmm.
Oakland.
Hmm.
And then my father, at the time, he was working at the co-op headquarters, which was like an El Cerrito, you
Hmm.
know what I mean, off
Hmm.
off the 80.
Hmm.
So, at the time, that was kind of the decision that was made, so that my sister could drive to school, he can get to work, and then my mom at the time was commuting to Vallejo. And but regardless of the details, if he had a tweed suit on, if he had a wool suit, whatever.
Right.
But the bigger point was that the sacrifice was made,
That's right.
and the sacrifice was made as at the time we would talk about the breadwinner,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where my father, he was doing very well in his corporate career, and to see him make that sacrifice for his family, it created a lasting impression. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Right.
I even remember, at times when there was, certain vacations. I remember, we my uncle at the time, he was stationed in Hawaii, and that was 1986. My mom, my sister, and me went to Hawaii. My dad fell back. He didn't go on the trip for whatever reason. But as a child, and especially after he lost, I attributed that to him embracing fatherhood and being a husband as a job of sacrifice.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Regardless of however you want to say it, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it, but that's how I remember it.
Mm.
And as I'm being a father and a husband today, I associate my job and role as being a husband and father with one of sacrifice. It's something that I believe, and again, this is something I saw my father do. I need to willingly, do it. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it's part of the job, part of the job description, and it's something that I embrace.
Mm.
But at the same time, I mean, I do like to do things for myself, so I'm not, walking around, carrying a literal cross every day. And that's the other thing is like, you know, as I've matured in the Lord, I begin to see some of these biblical patterns line
Mm-hmm.
up with some of what I saw as a child. So
Mm-hmm.
then that even reinforced it more, for me, when the Bible talks about that a husband is to love his wife, just like Christ loved the church. And we obviously know that Christ died literally for his bride, the church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at times, being a husband and being a father, you have to take the L for your family.
Mm. Yeah, for those that's just joining us, well, we're talking to Rufus Chamber about his book, I Stand, The Road to Manhood. You're listening to it on Love Bay Radio in Canada, and there's other places all across the country. I know there's Australia and the Caribbean islands and Africa. So I just want to welcome you all to this conversation. Can we have a conversation? And we're talking about manhood, which also leads to fatherhood. And we're talking about Rufus Chamber and his father and how he had a input, implant in his life in a way that caused him to be the man that he is today. Not only the man that he is today, but also the father he is. A lot of times it's easier to have that father figure in your life when it comes to parenting, because at least you have a model, you have something to go by. And I went into San Quentin and mentored a lot of men, and also had interviews with a lot of men. And one of the things that was alarming for me, Rufus, was the fact that when I asked these guys, tell me something positive that your father told you, and not
Hmm.
one of them could tell me, or tell me something positive that your father did for you. They couldn't really tell me anything positive, which, you know, other than the fact that, my father gave me a gun, or my father taught me how to sell
Hmm.
drugs. And I mean, we think that that's not what really happens, but unfortunately it does. And, that might be their way of saying, hey, I'm going to teach you how to, survive. I'm going to teach you how to hustle. I'm going to show you how, but really didn't give you those fundamentals to manhood. It didn't give you those fundamentals to being a good father. Now, what I really enjoyed about your book was how you added to scriptures, and you talked about the biblical aspects. So I want to talk about that a little bit. In your
Hmm.
book, you talk about like a father, like a son.
Hmm.
And then you go on to talk about David, and you talk about Solomon, and how David was a great man after God's heart. And, then Solomon ended up following his steps. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as I was, putting the book together, I was trying to interweave biblical stories and biblical precepts within the story of my life, but do it in a way where it didn't become too cumbersome or laborious.
Mm.
And, when I was at the time, I mean, again, this is 8, 9 years ago. But at the time in my revelation, I was thinking about, David and Solomon, you know what I mean? Where, obviously David's life influenced Solomon's life.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was some good and bad with that. We know that David, had natural desires like all of us men do,
Mm-hmm.
and David was he was in an influential place where he could act out and get what he wanted. And we're obviously talking about Bathsheba. And when we begin to trace Solomon's relationship with women, we see it went to another level, where he was the lover of strange women, and those strange women convinced him to worship their gods.
Mm.
And it's a trip, because recently I was doing some research for another class, and I was right there with David and Solomon. And it was interesting. Before as David was commissioning Solomon to build the temple,
Mm-hmm.
in that same conversation, he was he was imploring Solomon to know God for himself.
Mm-hmm.
It was as if, because we knew David was a worshiper,
Mm-hmm.
right, wrong, or indifferent. He was a worshiper. The Bible says that David, was a man after God's own heart. And it was as if David knew, and again, I'm just going to use my spiritual imagination, but it's as if David knew that Solomon was about to be promoted.
Mm-hmm.
And for his future success, Solomon had to have a bona fide relationship with God for himself,
Mm-hmm.
to lead God's people and to protect him from himself.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at David's life, you know, when you think about, the Bathsheba conversation, and, the baby that was born and lost out of that, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, David had some wisdom that he
Mm-hmm.
was imparting into his son at that moment. And, let's fast forward, into our trajectory. There's wisdom that's needed for men. And again, you referenced the men that are in San Quentin. And, it's painful to see the Black family being deconstructed before our very eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Because the truth of the matter is, and again, I live in South LA, right? I'm over
Mm-hmm.
here literally in South Los Angeles, and a lot of our communities are living in the post crack epidemic era.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And our communities have been pillaged, and a lot of our families have been pillaged. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we have that truth as something we have to deal with, but then we also have the truth that there are resources that are available to every man, to every boy, regardless of the presence or lack of presence of a father. You know what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
in the book, I talk about, that chapter, No More Excuses. And, that was part of the reasoning why I wrote that chapter on No More Excuses. Is I really wanted to force the hand of men to reconcile their past once and for all and embrace their future. And
Mm-hmm.
to do so, we have to come out of the excuses. We can always acknowledge our past, acknowledge what happened, but now in 2000, and at that time it was 2013, now in 2021, guess what? We have to advance the ball. We don't have an option in the matter anymore. Our communities, our families are in need of us right now. Straight up, man.
You said something in the book. You says there are countless mothers, sisters, daughters, and even wives on desperate pursuit of a concrete understanding of the men they love, yet many have come up empty-handed. Uh, and this is really good for the women as well. And I'll
Hmm.
say this because you might be a woman trying to understand your spouse, or you might be a woman that's trying to understand your father, and you may be a woman trying to understand your boyfriend. But you're having challenges because you don't understand him, or you don't understand where he is, and but you don't know the past, and you don't know the history, and you don't know the foundation which was laid for this young man, and all the trauma that he has to experience just because of he being black. And so kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Stuart, both of us, through our own personal journeys as men and through our own personal journeys in being with men, you know, articulating our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, that is not it's not intuitive. Sometimes, and it was a trip. I was interviewing a close friend of mine, and he said something that really grabbed me. He said, even when we shut down as men, that
Mm-hmm.
is an expression of emotion. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So we're in a heated conversation with our wives, our family, whoever, and we shut down, and our wife is sitting there like, dude, you don't want to talk anymore.
Right.
And when my buddy said that, is like, that is actually an emotional response, is shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of our mothers and a lot of our wives and even some of our daughters, when we are unable to let them inside the recesses of our hearts, they're left with a lack of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible says, unless two agree, how can they walk together? So again, part of that walking together is in a relationship that there is an exchange of meaningful dialogue and discourse, so that each party understands the perspective of the other person. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so again, part of this book is helping men reconcile their past. And at the time, I was heavily involved in deliverance ministry, so
Mm-hmm.
there was definitely a spin on that in there. But as we can reconcile our past, we can embrace our today and reach after our future. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, when you talk about trying to have a productive, healthy, meaningful conversation with the women we love, we are better able to do so when we have reconciled our past, where
Mm-hmm.
we have forgiven those who have wronged us, where we have released trauma, that we have lived through, and some of that trauma we keep locked up so tightly that we don't want to access it ourselves, and we don't know but want nobody else to access. There's
Mm-hmm.
some things that some of us men have went through that we are resolved to take to our grave.
Mm-hmm.
But the unfortunate part about that is, us taking that to our grave means that somewhere in our psyche and subconscious, we're going to have it protected. You
Mm-hmm.
got it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to, what I believe, and see, some of this was my thesis in the book, is going to hinder our ability to love.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to hinder our ability to, watch this, receive and give love.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're fathering from a place of pain. Now we're
Broken.
husbanding from a place of pain, man.
Mm-hmm.
And then our wives and our children will never get the very best of us. They'll get, and sometimes they won't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
They can get a functioning father and a functioning husband, but the dude could be hemorrhaging on the inside because of
Mm-hmm.
the past. So it's a very deep conversation, and but it's needed, man.
You know, man, there's so much to talk about here, and especially in
Yeah,
your
brother.
book. And I'm trying
Yeah,
to figure
brother.
out how to
Yeah,
navigate because I
brother.
know we only got an hour to do this. But
Hey,
you
brother.
hit on so many things, and
Yeah,
one of the
brother.
things that I really want to talk about is because in your book you talked about all these positive things about your dad. And then you said, but then you call them cycles. You said, but there's cycles of good and bad. And so you said one of the bad cycles was the fact of him communicating emotionally. And you say, and something that you struggle with yourself, which I love because you were very transparent in the book about yourself and your dad. It's like he's not all perfect, he had some really great qualities, but this was an area that he lacked in. And not only he lacks in it, most men lack in it
Yeah,
because they
yeah,
have not been taught how to handle and communicate and express their emotions. Talk about that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, again, and for the audience, um, if you have not watched the movie Fences with Denzel Washington, I encourage you to do so, because that movie gave you an excellent view of fatherhood and sonhood from two different generations. And so I just want to plug that, because it when I watch that movie, I think of my father. I think of my
Mm,
grandfathers, where emotionalism was not in the job description. You know what I mean? Where, again, Stuart, we were told, don't cry, suck it up.
mm,
Straight. I
mm,
mean, that was
mm,
literally
mm,
guidance,
mm,
that we were given. We were raised to be strong and tough.
mm,
I remember the dudes in my neighborhood, man, they would just fire on our shoulders as
mm,
little boys so we could be tough, man. Nah,
mm,
nah, we're gonna light you up and you're gonna
mm,
suck it up. Or sometimes it's in the chest, man. Let me just,
mm,
we want you to be tough. So that was the narrative. That was the narrative. So again, when my father, he was not at the house talking about his feelings, other
mm,
than, I
mm,
need you to do this. It was
mm,
performance. You know what I mean?
mm,
Like, no, you got to do this.
mm,
No, you're being lazy. You got to do this. So, but I never had a conversation about, how my father felt about his father,
mm,
or how he felt when his mother passed away when he was a little boy, and how he felt when his sister got married. We never talked about any of that.
mm,
You know what I mean? So fast forward to me, I feel like here I come, being a father, being a husband, is I knew that, you know, I know that I have to be able to talk to my daughters about their feelings,
mm,
because their well-being is very important to me.
mm,
you
mm,
know so yeah, so over time, I know how to ask questions. I know how to try and understand how they're
mm,
feeling, and blah 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 blah. But a lot of times I'm peppering them with questions, but I'm not sitting there saying, well, this is how I feel about it.
mm, mm,
Because again, that's not my priority.
mm,
So I'm not at home trying to promote, my feelings. Again,
mm,
it's just not set up like that. So I guess the most important thing about that, now I go back to Fences, is with each generation, the challenge of men and fathering is changing right before our very eyes.
mm, mm,
Because, so when we grew up, it was about, at some level, most of us wanted to make our parents somewhat happy, right? There was
mm,
some level of, and this is some of the other research I did, man. You're gonna trip out. When we were kids, right? Do you remember how many times we were told to respect your elders?
mm, mm,
Respecting others was more important than how we even respected ourselves.
That's right. That's
Like
true.
we were sent out the door saying, you're going to go and respect that teacher. You're going to respect your elders. You're going to respect Mr. Johnson on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to look him in the eyeball and say, yes, sir. No, ma'am. But now in this era,
Mm-hmm.
it's all about the individual, the child, the individual. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
got kids running around trying to, well, I don't want to get into that, but we have children now dictating who they are
Mm-hmm.
more than parents dictating their behavior,
Mm-hmm.
of what's acceptable. So it's changed. So that means that the father is now being challenged with moving differently. So that's why it's like, so if my dad was right here, I say, Dad, I
Right.
praise God for how you fathered me, but now in this day, it's different. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I could do some of what you did, but I can't do all of what you did
Mm-hmm.
because again, the game has changed. And the same thing with being a husband.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I felt like, and I remember, watching my father, even my godfather, and even some of my uncles. I mean, and back to Fences, when Denzel Washington, and I'm so happy they put that scene in the book, and I mean in the movie, and I'm assuming it's in the play as well, the August Wilson playwright, when he gave his wife his check, that was so it was so pivotal in the household,
Mm-hmm.
because really when he did that, there was a sigh of relief. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? Well, like,
Mm-hmm.
I did my job. I went to
Mm-hmm.
work.
Mm-hmm.
I brought my check home, and my wife can now manage the house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
For us in 2021, it's a box that needs to be checked, but it's not like, oh, this sense of relief. Hey, I'm the greatest father husband in the world. No, brother, that's the beginning of what's going on up in here. You get it?
Right. Right.
So again, it's each generation is presenting a change. I mean, if we had time, we could talk about Dwayne Wade
Mm-hmm.
and how he is fathering
Mm-hmm.
his child who is having this revelation about their sexual identity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So again, in our day, man, come on, that wasn't
That wasn't even a conversation.
commonplace. But
Mm-hmm.
now this is like, so now we see Dwayne Wade trying to figure it out
Mm-hmm.
and not only figure it out, but figure it out on a global platform.
Mm-hmm.
You talk
Mm-hmm.
about fathering, that's hard work. That
Yeah.
is hard. Magic Johnson too. That's
Yeah.
hard work.
Yeah.
You're trying to
TD Jakes too.
reconcile. Yeah, come on. You're trying to reconcile your fathering in front of a global stage, man.
It's
That's
scary.
hard.
You
Very
know,
hard.
one of the things, and you're hitting some really good points, because as you know, I have a 33-year-old daughter, Jessica,
Mm-hmm.
and then I came with Stu and Destiny several years later. So the Jessica is 16 years older than Stu.
Mm-hmm.
Man, parenting Jessica is completely different than parenting Stuart and Destiny. And they're all my kids. I'm their father, but society has set up a different way of how you parent your children. They tell them what you can and cannot do, so you can't even really discipline your children the way you really want to. Even when it comes to you talk about that crack epidemic, how that has impacted our nation, how it impacted our communities, mostly our urban communities, because not only now was the father missing, but the mother was missing too, and the grandparents was raising the children.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens here is that's when that identity piece comes in, because now you're trying to figure it out.
Mm.
George over there got a mother and a father, or at least
Yeah.
got a mother.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's on drugs. My father's in jail. And then you start seeing, I want to touch on this as well, how uh, society is changing when it comes to women in corporate America. And
Hmm.
now there's women making more money than men. So like you said, there could be at one time the woman would be the one who controlled the home and make sure the home went well, but then the father was the one who was out there, was the breadwinner, and he was making the money. But now the roles are changing, and we haven't been able to adjust to the change. Well, let me tell you what I mean when I said adjust to the change. The man is used to his father working and making the money, and he's used to seeing his father do whatever he does, whether, like you say, that it's positive or negative, but that's the model that he sees, and that's the model that he takes on. And so he begins to say, well, I'm going to pay the bills, but you're not making as much money as her, but you guys are our team. So, there's now men staying home with the children,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
wife going to make the money. And it is
Yes.
cool like that if you're a team and you know who you are. But the problem is a lot of times we don't know who we are, or we feel like our masculinity is questioned because
Hmm.
she's making this money and I'm staying home with the kids, and what your friends and your partners is telling you about who you are, or, man, how you staying home, man, you not a man, blah blah. Society will shape and make these put these places demands on us that we still have to be able to express how we feel, be able to adjust
Yeah.
to, like you say, even this change in fathering. But
Yeah.
all that begins with the foundation of somebody telling you who you are, and that you're are pleased, or you're comfortable with who you are, and then you are
Hmm.
comfortable with making those adjustments. You said something earlier, and it talked about, even with your kids, and how you parent your children, and then how your dad parents. Even when I talk to my kids, or I was talking to a guy, and we were talking about fathering, and the brother was out in the street, and he was in the life, and then he went to prison, man. And so a lot of his time that he was supposed to be parenting his children, he was in prison. But then he had got
Hmm.
out when they were like teenagers, and then he began to try to turn it around. But he was saying that one time his daughter had fell down, and she was crying hysterically, Rufus. And he just, he paralyzed, man. He just watching her, and he didn't know what to do. and
Mm.
and his mom told him something just as simple, like, boy, just hold her, just hug her,
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, because he didn't know, he missed that
Mm.
class. His dad wasn't there. When he fell, he had to get up, brush off, and keep it pushing.
Yeah.
And so, it could be kind of awkward for a man to do these things when he's not used to having those things. But then, even though he knows it's important for his children, are even important, as far as the communication is concerned. You talked about some really good things about communication. I don't want to miss these things, because, as you know, this is what kind of helped us implement the communication curriculum into our man-to-man program, is because we understood that there were a lot of men and women that did not know how to communicate. And because they didn't know how to communicate, they had a lot of conflict, and
Yeah.
conflict led to domestic violence. And so we say, okay, if we can get them to start learning how to communicate, communication 101, active listening, listen to what a
Yeah.
person is saying,
Yeah.
but then being able to repeat what you heard, because
Yeah.
if you misinformation will lead to miscommunication, which will lead to conflict, which leads to death. That can cause somebody to die. That can cause
Hmm.
somebody to get injured. You can have health issues because of this, all these things because of a lack of communication, which should come from that fatherhood piece.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, us being effective communicators, and the other thing is, when we talk about being effective communicators, let's just go back to leadership. Let's go back to teaching our men that they need to be leaders. Number one, they need to be leaders of themselves. And as they show themselves as being good self leaders, then God can entrust them with the lives of somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And part of that entrusting is that our men, part of our leading is knowing how to communicate. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
See, when you start, and back to the road to manhood, when you start stringing these things together, then we could see what we're being called to be. But if
Mm-hmm.
we can't lead ourselves effectively, how are we going to be good stewards over a woman and some children? How is that going
Mm.
to happen? Or a job or a career or some money? Like how is that really going to happen? You know what I mean? So when we talk about communication and part of leading, and Stuart, you know this. I mean, you lead a family, you lead teams, you lead ministry. Part of the communication is you have to be able to communicate in a manner
Mm-hmm.
in which the person on your team can make their best contribution. That's
Mm.
leadership.
Mm.
You know
Mm.
what I'm saying?
Mm.
But if we're not teaching our boys how to be leaders, how are they going to be entrusted with the lives of other folks in the future? It's just not going to work. You know what I mean? So that's the other
Mm.
thing is that, and I understand that as citizens of the kingdom, we are in the world, but we're not of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because some people try and push back and say, well, guess what? The world shouldn't be telling us how to be men, how to be fathers, and all of that's fine. You know what I mean? Because, yeah, if we find our true identity within the scripture and we're doing our job per the scripture, then yeah, I guess the world wouldn't have to, tell us or show us. But unfortunately, when we fail to do that, then yeah, culture's gonna have something to say. You know
No,
what I
it's
mean?
no. No, keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. So again, I feel like, through ministries like Man to Man and countless other resources, there's such a rich opportunity for our men, our husbands, and our fathers and our boys to really, get on the right road. Because again, our communities and our families, man, they're depending on it.
No, whoo, boy, I tell you, brother, we we can talk about this conversation forever,
Yeah.
man.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know this is your stuff. This is your stuff, brother. Yeah. This is your stuff. But hey, we just give it a little appetizer.
Yes,
Get a little
sir.
appetizer.
You talked about in your book, and this was good. You said in your book, you said a man's emotions can be deep, strong, and passionate without anyone necessarily seeing or hearing them. And then you said this was something that your father struggled with, what we talked about earlier. But then you said another cycle I contend with is being emotionally sterile, is what you call. You were speaking about becoming emotionally detached, present physically, but not present emotionally. That happens every day. Even with, and I'm a military guy, I'm a Marine, so I can use an analogy of a person who goes to war and he fights in the war and he comes back home. He's present, but emotionally he's somewhere else. You know, he could hear a backfire in a car and hit the deck, hit the ground, thinking it's a a bullet, flying, you know. And there are so many men that are present but not physically there for whatever reason. I was reading something and was talking about fathers being present sometimes and not physically there would be almost as good if they weren't there at all. And I was like, well, how's
Wow.
that? But
Wow.
they're saying because he's not bringing anything to the
Wow.
table, and it would be better for him not to be there rather than him being there. I was like, wow,
Wow.
you know, um, you talk about leadership and you talk about these guys, being able to uh, be involved and engaged in their children's lives. But then also there's a part when you talk about leadership, you know, we don't just inherit that, we have to be taught that. And if we're not taught that, it's going to be really difficult to teach your children something that you don't have. I always say it's kind of hard to give a $5 bill if you never had one, or tell somebody what a milkshake tastes like if you never
Yeah.
had one for yourself. So it's, I'm not saying it's completely impossible, because some fathers have learned that well, I'm gonna be a really good dad, I'm gonna be a really good man, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do opposite of everything my father
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. I have some friends. That's exactly what they
And
did.
they end up being some really great fathers.
Hmm.
So I wanted to touch base on one more thing. Hold on. We get 4:50. I'm gonna see if we got a little more time that we can keep going. Because if not, we're gonna have to redo this conversation.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah. Yeah.
redo it, but
We could
just
do a
add
part
on to it.
two. Yeah.
Um, Another thing you talked about was another bad cycle. Men tend to contend with a relational blockage with his wife. And you talked about that. There is a blockage in the knowledge or passion to personify the husband. You said men know how to play games. You said they know how to keep score. They even know how to win the game. But a lot of times what happens is they don't know how to play the game when the rules change. You understand what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
by nature we're hunters. By nature we are survivors, but sometimes we don't know how to improvise when things change. You know, for instance, like you just talked about the brother and his child. Now that has to be something that caught him off guard. Dwayne Wade, when he had to parent his child on
Pivot.
this sexuality, that you
Yeah.
never expected that this would ever go down like this. And
Yeah.
but you still have to love this child unconditional, and you still
Hmm.
have to understand and support this child, even though it may go against the things in what you believe. You know what I'm saying?
That's challenging.
And
It's challenging.
it is challenging, and that's when communication becomes really valuable, and being able to be transparent and open, to be able to hear what your child is saying without any judgment, without being judgmental, without being oh, you are, X, Y, and Z, because
Hmm.
the brother grew up in the hood, and this is happening to your son. Then you used to saying, well,
Yeah.
you already know, fill in the blank. I don't need to tell you, and
Yeah.
so you have to take that part of what or what you've been
We
raised
gotta
in.
learn. Yeah.
We got to learn. Yeah.
We
And
gotta
that's
learn.
hard. It's hard. It's
Hmm.
really, you know, if you're just tuning in, I just want to say that we're talking to Rufus Chambers about his book, I Stand, The Road to Manhood. And a lot of you all are listening to this conversation. You may be a man, and, a lot of times the truth hurts. And so you may hear this conversation and that you're right where we're talking, but you don't want to face that reality. There's times, Rufus, that I have had conversations with people about what we're talking about. For instance, there's been people that know man to man exists, and they know the work that we're doing. And these guys have millions of dollars to give to man, but they don't even want to have a conversation about this topic. And I'll tell you
Yeah.
why. Because it's going to bring up some memories, and it's going to
Hmm.
make them be transparent, because it's going it's a lot of hurt, it's a lot of pain, it's a lot of rejection, it's a lot of things that they don't want to remember, but the thing that they want to remember is I made it. because they feel
Yeah.
like they're arrived.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got
They
$100 million.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
ain't have no father. I didn't have no
Yeah.
father, and
Yeah.
so, but when you close the door, Rufus, and when they're alone, that void is still there.
That's right. That's
The
right.
rejection of a father. I wish
Mm-hmm.
that he told me he loved me. I
Yeah.
wish he taught me what it really meant to be a man. I got
Yeah.
this money. I got these women. I got this material things. I got a house and all these cars. But you know what? I don't even know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll run from those conversations. So then when you say, well, man, I'm trying to help men become better men, and man, you got the resource to help me, they don't even want to entertain that conversation. Because
Yeah.
that's a door they don't want to open up, if you understand what I'm saying. Because again, when you talk about this emotional piece that you're talking about in your book, Rufus, and you're talking about being able to express how you feel, it
Mm-hmm.
goes back to that. Now you're being transparent, and that's a sign of
Yeah.
weakness. Now you're expressing how you feel. And if you express how you feel, you're going to get emotional, and somebody may see you cry, or you might be soft, or you might be considered a punk, or whatever the situation is,
Yeah.
because you have opened up and expressed how you feel. And that
Yeah.
part of your emotions has been shut down the majority of your life.
Yeah. 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 And the sad part is, a lot of our brothers inside, incarcerated, decisions were made because of a failure to manage emotions at one encounter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some brothers is doing bids because of that inability. So that's the thing, is like, there's so many reasons why we need to help our men manage their emotions and raise their sons in a manner where this is normalized. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Where emotional and mental health is normalized in the house. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Wh-
yeah.
So that's the thing, because yeah, we can go back to 1982, on the block and what we was told, but again, some of that is not currency with our children today. You know what I mean? So we have to figure out a way, to reach. I mean, that's the other thing. Let's put ego aside. We want to reach our kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We want to give them what they need to be successful, period.
Mm-hmm.
Or we should.
Mm-hmm.
That should be our desire. So some of it means we got to unlearn, and some of it means we got to learn some stuff. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And in the book, once I kind of got past the part of talking about how to reconcile your past, I was trying to get some practical tips moving forward that can help us get on the right road. And again, hey, I'm not a subject matter expert. I just shared what I had to share. You know what I
Right.
mean? And you and I know, when we're in ministry, we're surrounded by a diversity of men.
Mm-hmm.
Some are successful, some have been unsuccessful. Some had a father, some had the wrong father, some had a good father.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And here we are trying to preach the gospel and expand the kingdom of God through the service of these men.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're seeing the issues they deal with.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So that was
Mm.
part of the heart of writing the book, is like, wow,
Mm.
this is really needed, because of
Mm.
where some men are at. They need somebody to call a timeout and come see about them.
No, this is good. You also talked about, you said men being displaced from the seat of authority.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a major reason why we have what we have too. Because and I talk about this a lot, is you know uh, women can have as many babies as they want, and they can get as much money from public assistance as long as they have these kids, but you can't have that man in that house. you
Yeah.
know because if that
Yeah.
man is in that house, then we're going to remove this public assistance. Now we
Yeah.
can give you Section 8 too, and you only have to pay $50 a month,
Mm-hmm.
and still pay you for each and every one of those children. But we're
Yeah.
displacing this authority of this father, this man figure, and we're sacrificing this little money that is temporal for something that we have that's eternal, because these
Mm-hmm.
kids are growing up without a father, so they have a lack of identity, they have a lack uh, of emotions, men and
Yeah.
women, and they're growing
Mm-hmm.
up. One of the things you said in this book, I just thought about it, that I want to talk about, because I know this for myself. You said when you started dating as a teen, then you started figuring out these young women that didn't have fathers just by dating them. Talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was interesting, when you start. Well, when I started dating, I mean, you're starting to develop relationships, with young women, and at the time, in that day, meeting a father was very important, and we saw that
Mm-hmm.
imagery in Bad Boys 2,
Mm-hmm.
when Martin Lawrence's daughter boyfriend Reggie came to the door. I mean, in my day, that was very important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to represent well when I met the father, because for the women, for the girls that had fathers in the home, their father's approval went a long way. The
Mm-hmm.
flip side is, you know, dating women and having girlfriends when there wasn't a father in the house, that was different. That was different. And again, I don't want to generalize, and everybody's not the same, but sometimes, I saw other men capitalize on that void, because if a young lady did not have a father, she may have been looking for love, and some of these little dudes would come in and run game and start manipulating them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the sad part, bro, let me just keep it 100 up in here, right? Let's take the
Mm-hmm.
clergy collars off. In
Mm-hmm.
the black community, the profession of a pimp was glorified. Let's just
Mm-hmm.
say it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Iceberg Slim, the Mac,
Mm-hmm.
Goldie, all of these characters were glorified.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So some of our men found their identity in black exploitation movies that glorified pimping,
Mm-hmm.
reading Iceberg Slim novels, and
Mm-hmm.
listening to our favorite rappers back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you load a young man up with that information, and you waltz a young woman in front of him who's innocent, who's never been loved by a man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Brother, that's a dangerous experiment.
Brother, you
That's a
right on
very
point.
dangerous experience. So again, part of my job in 2021 over here off 78th Place in Los Angeles, I want my girls, my daughters, to know what a man looks like
Mm-hmm.
and to know what love looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And they're watching how. And again, I'm not perfect, man. I make mistakes every day. Monday through Sunday, I make
That's
mistakes. So
called
don't let me.
parenting.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
called
so
parenting.
so so don't let me, but they're seeing me give it my best shot, and how I love their mother, my wife Jamila, how they see me love her, and how I give them myself. At the end of the day, I'm just trying to give them myself, so that when they are dating, and my oldest has already started dating, that she's dating from a place of not a deficiency because I'm not around.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, man, that whole, again, if we had time, now that'll be a fun conversation, deconstructing the influence
Mm-hmm.
of again, the glorification of pimping, and and again, and I love, classic hip hop, but again, when you begin to trace the lineage, some of those images from the 70s, it just found itself in the DNA of the culture of hip hop. And now, Stuart, the truth of the matter is, you may have a grandfather, a father, and a son reciting the same lyrics.
Brother.
And the question is, do they know that it's just lyrics, that it's just music, or do they think it's real life?
Right.
That's the question.
Yeah. No,
I'm being messy now, but brother,
no,
I'm
that's
just trying to
real. That's
promote
real.
some thought up in here, brother. Are we trying to
The
promote
thing
some thought up in
is,
here, man?
now people are listening to this conversation all
Yeah,
over the world, and they may not experience that level of what you
yeah,
just said, but where we
yeah.
come from, I mean, there's a pimping spirit still in Oakland. I mean, all you
Man,
got to
come
do is
on,
go on
bro.
International Boulevard and you'll
Yeah,
see
yeah,
13, 14 years, 13, 14.
yeah,
Now, when I was growing up, they were adults, not
yeah,
kids,
yeah,
man. I mean,
yeah,
these are
yeah,
kids now. These are
yeah,
somebody's kids walking the streets for somebody thinking
yeah,
that this person loves you.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
they
yeah,
equate
yeah.
that to love. And we're
Have
can
mercy.
we have a conversation today? I got my guest here, Rufus Chambers. We're talking about Stan, the Road to Manhood, and we're talking about all of these things of what is important as far as a father. How before we can even get to the father part, we're discussing this manhood part because this is where it all starts. And if we're missing that part, it's not that a man cannot become a man. And it's not just because he has some bad traits of some bad learnings that he can't correct those things. It may be a little bit more harder or difficult, but these are some things that we're having a conversation to say, look, you need to check yourself, re-examine yourself, re-examine what you did not like about your father, what you don't like about
That's
yourself.
right.
If you have some children, then make them a priority and
That's
start
right.
changing your life for the sake of that child. Because if you don't, they will grow up just like you. I guarantee you. And so when we talk about having these conversations with these guys in San Quentin, I mean, these are rich conversations. And one of the things that you said earlier that I just want to address is even when it talks about this emotional piece that you're talking about in your book. Believe it or not, the ones in prison are more transparent than the folks that are not. And I
Come on.
tell them all the time when I go in there, I say, man, I have to commend you all because I go there
Yeah.
to preach. And these guys are locked up but more free
Come
than the
on.
people that are
Come on.
free
Come on.
because they realize they messed up. They realize that, you know what, they can't fix it right now, but they're working on trying to fix it because they got time to fix it, and they're not going
Yeah.
anywhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now it's time that we start trying to address these men all over the world and just
That's
start
right.
saying, look, pay attention to what you're doing.
That's right.
Make sure that you're doing the right thing because every action that you make, there's a reaction, whether it's negative or positive. And so you might think, because this is the thing, Rufus, and you'll know this, and I'm not telling you something you don't know. Growing up, when you was growing up in Richmond, there was a lot of guys you knew that didn't have fathers that made some bad decisions.
Yeah.
But this is the part that's going to get you. The decisions that they made, they weighted them out, and their calculations wasn't accurate.
That's
Let me tell you
good.
what I
That's
mean.
good.
Their
That's good.
calculations wasn't accurate.
That's good.
A brother go and rob a 7-Eleven thinking he only gonna do 1 year, 2 year, and then 2 years. But then when he goes to court and the cases start stacking up against him, he's doing 12 or 13 or 14 years for robbing a 7-Eleven. He calculated his time wrong. But see, if
Yeah.
he had a
Yeah.
father
Yeah.
like you, that would have been like Rufus. I mean, because you wouldn't even thought about doing nothing like that. Because
No.
that wasn't, you knew that one, I don't
Yeah.
want to displease my mom. I don't want to
Yeah.
disappoint my dad. I'm not raised that way. I made some bad decisions, but that's not one of those bad decisions.
That's right.
But
That's right.
today, it's because, as you said in your book, the authority is displaced, and because that
Mm-hmm.
authority is displaced, there's no checks, there's no balances, there
Mm-hmm.
that you can kind of do what you want. There's no integrity, nobody's watching, so you think you're going to get away with it, and then you miscalculate, and then you find yourself doing something that costs you
Miscalculation, brother.
the rest of your
That's a
life.
word. That's a word. You said something there.
Yeah.
Miscalculating the risk. Have
So
mercy.
now they let us go a little longer, man. So we got about 20 more
Uh,
minutes.
I don't have 20 more
Okay.
minutes.
All right. Well,
I have
let me,
put in the chat. Yeah,
okay.
I got
Well,
to go
this
actually.
is
So
this is let me do one thing then before you
okay,
go.
okay,
Uh,
okay.
Love Baby Radio. I want you to go on to Amazon and support this brother, Rufus Chambers. His book is called I Stand The Road to Manhood. You can go on to Amazon, put that up, and you can contact him there, as well as make sure I get all your stuff. So you got uh, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and then his email is Rufus. Well, his Instagram is at Rufus Rufus Chambers Chambers online at Rufus Chambers online. That's his Instagram in case you want to hit him there. And he's also on YouTube. Rufus on YouTube, Rufus Chambers online. Uh, Rufus, man, it's been a pleasure, brother. I'm gonna have you come back,
Absolutely.
man. We might have to
Absolutely.
do 2 or 3 of these, man, because it's rich, man. But hey,
Yeah,
man,
you got stirred up, brother. I like student got turned up. I love it. I love
hey,
it. That
man.
means I
Well,
did my job. You turned up, bro.
you did do your job, man. It's a wonderful book, and folks, I want you to support this brother because this book is not something. I mean, if you're a man and you're trying to navigate through this is the book for you. If you're a woman and you're trying to understand men, this is a book for you. So, and it's really an easy book to read. It's not difficult. I know a lot of men don't read, but I think we should read. And so I want to just promote my brother's book. And
Thank
I
you, man.
thank
I
you, man. I
appreciate it.
appreciate you, man. I love you with all my
Absolutely.
heart,
Love
man.
you
I
too. Love you
hey,
too.
if your mom listening, man, you're part of the Pirellians, man. I'm not gonna change your name,
Absolutely.
but I love you like I love Michael and Eric,
Lo-
man.
love
You
you
know.
too, man.
All
Keep
right,
doing the
brother.
work, brother. Keep doing the
Yeah, you
work.
too, man. You too,
All
man. Thanks
right.
a
All
lot for
right.
being
God
here.
bless you
God
all.
bless you. All right.
Absolutely. All right.
Bye bye.